Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again after 225 episodes. It is finally time to cover some Circus Maximus here on the podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. I am very good. This kind of leaves us open to talk about other Circus Maximus albums in the future rather than doing them all in one full blast. I just don't think I could have wrapped my head around it in enough time to do all 4 albums. So I'm glad we went with 9 because I think it's a really good release, and it got me honestly so much more excited about seeing them live in a couple of weeks, and I was already pretty excited to begin with.
You know, it's funny. I have some strong thoughts on this, which I'll get to when the time is right. But I did forget, kind of when I was listening to their whole discography, when I thought that was going to be, kind of a thing, how many good songs this band has recorded over the years. And although they don't have a ton of material, they've got some really, really interesting stuff. They've got other stuff from Havoc that I'm not as crazy about, but by and large, there's a lot of good material in the discography, and we're talking about a kind of a transitional album for them in many ways with their release 9. But before we get there, I promised you last week that I would go back and I'd listen to some Serenia, because their release 9 Destinies and a Downfall, which came out in 2007, was an album that I had heard. I don't think I had ever really put 2 and 2 together, though. And I'm obviously referencing Monica Peterson, who was on the Mercenary album that we discussed last week. Really enjoyable album. I'm glad I went back and listened to it. This is a band that I feel like really was on the precipice of doing great things, but they just never quite got over the hump. I know they had done a bunch of touring and they've had a number of lineup changes throughout the years. But I feel like they could have probably broken through with maybe just a little bit more time or what have you. Are they still like around and recording? I think it's been a spell since I guess they came out with an album last year called 1977. Admittedly, I don't remember hearing it or it didn't pop for me that much. Were you a fan of Serenia, or how much of a fan were you?
Yeah, I always liked them. I just they never just like got into 4th or 5th gear for me. Like they were just a really solid band. But and I check out every album that they've released, including last year's, and I don't even remember if it ended up making my list at the end of the year. I'd have to look back. I don't see it. So clearly I thought they were better albums, but I mean, that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. I just think that, I don't know. They have so many albums, like it's hard to kind of distinguish one from the other for me. And like you said, there's a lot of, personnel changes, I feel like. So, I'll always keep an eye out for them, but, I can't say that they've had any albums that have really just like blown me away. I guess I remember it's funny because they're kind of from not the ashes, but like, do you remember there was a band called Tristania?
Oh yeah, of course. Very gothic sounding.
Yeah. So like one of the members of Tristania had left the band and started Serenia. So that's kind of where they, kind of came from. I remember, when I had my radio show in college, like going through the stacks and looking at all the stuff that they had lying around. And I remember seeing the Tristania album. Which was it? World of Glass? Yeah, it was World of Glass. I remember just seeing that. I can't remember if I actually listened to it at the time, but just one of those things that stick in my head. I remember that CD just being in the studio, trying to find like something that might fit what I was playing, I guess. So I don't know if I ever even bothered playing it, but just looked like an interesting album cover. And I think that for that reason, that band was on my radar since then, but I didn't really know there was a connection to Serenia. So there you go.
Yeah, nice. It seems like it's a bit of a small world, and there's always a connection between these things. Speaking of connections, the band Paralydium came out with their new album, Universe Calls. These, for those that don't know, Paralydium is a Swedish prog metal outfit that is, I guess, now on their second full length release, if I'm not mistaken. They are, in many ways, I think, a nice companion to Circus Maximus, just that melodic prog style, which is very technically proficient, but also just dedicated to really tight knit songs. I thought this was a really good release. I think it's definitely worth a listen. And I say ties because if I'm not mistaken, I think a bunch of these guys used to be in Dynasty or were in Dynasty at some point. So definitely showing off their more technical side with this release. But again, just a very solid album that's worth hearing if you're into the whole prog metal stuff.
Yeah, I have it on my ledger. I just haven't gotten to it yet. I've heard a couple of the singles, and I remember when they first started releasing songs on YouTube and stuff as the Paralydium Project that I think we both were excited to hear what they had to come up with. And their first album was good, and I'm looking forward to hearing this next one. But I think I was saying to you prior that I'm kind of in like a holding pattern with new music until Prog Power is over, I think. And then after that, I'll go into, wrapping up the year and finalizing lists and all that stuff. But yeah, for now, I've been kind of really focusing on just Prog Power bands. Yeah,
I mean, listen, I'm behind as well a little bit anyway. There was a single that came out from Fairyland out of France about a month ago, and I just heard it for the first time earlier today. The song is called To Stars and Beyond, and it is exactly what you'd expect from Fairyland. This is going to be the first single from their 5th full-length album, which I think is due out later this year at some point. This is very heavy on the symphonic side of power.
It's actually that single's been out for a couple of months. There's a new single called A New Dawn. I think that might be what you're.
Yes. I misspoke. You're absolutely right. Really, I mean, again, just kind of what you'd expect from this band at this point, but they, I think, are really hitting the symphonic side of the power metal equation. Very, very heavy on the strings and the orchestration. If you're into that sort of stuff, I think that this is definitely something people should check out as well.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of this band, so I'm curious what comes next. I know like these 2 singles are the first output from them since their founding member Philippe and keyboard player passed away in 2022, and the band is kind of carrying on the torch, so to speak. I'm trying to see. It doesn't look like there's very many members that go quite far back as Philippe did. He was part of the band since the very first album in 2003. It looks like their drummer, Wildrick, who's the drummer, guitarist, and bass player. I assume that now that JB is their drummer, he's probably not drumming. I digress. Anyway. He was an original member, but all the other members have kind of joined the band in recent years or have been in the band since, prior to the most recent album. So it's interesting. This is a band that definitely, I think, has had a lot of progression, and it was cool. I think they got on my radar because Elisa Martin was the vocalist on their very first album, and they kind of pivoted from having a female voice to switching over. I want to say, have they had a different vocalist for each album they've done up until this point? I know Max Leclerc was their singer at one point. Francesco Cavalieri, who is the singer from Windrose, was their most recent singer, and now currently Archie Kane is their newest singer out of the UK. He was I don't know if you remember, there was a band called Woods of Wonders. He was on a couple of tracks on the album Lost. I
have no recollection of that whatsoever. It may as well be a complete void in my memory.
Yeah, it's another symphonic power metal group that I kind of remember at the time and probably haven't thought of since. But looks like I do have one track from them that I put on a playlist back in 2022. So, just going through the family trees and all, like you said, everyone's connected.
Yeah, I'll say that is a deep cut right there. But yeah, like lots of new stuff I feel like is on the horizon. Just to name a few, the new Simone Simons album came out, the new Flesh God Apocalypse album came out, the new Dark Tranquility album came out, and then we just got a bunch of promos sent to us as well. So there's just lots of stuff on the horizon, and I feel like it's going to be a very busy third quarter as we lead into the end of the year, and get our list together. But for me, like I had so many albums on the front end of the top 50 list that I was kind of putting in order, and then it kind of just came to a grinding halt in July and August. So I still need to fill up a bunch of slots, but given what's on the horizon, I don't think that's going to be very difficult to do whatsoever.
No, there's a lot of stuff to look forward to. I saw that Voodoo Circle came out with a new single, and like, to be honest with you, I didn't realize that David Reedman had rejoined the band. He was on their previous album, but I kind of bailed after the album before that. Herbie Langens was kind of filling in, and I just love David Reedman's voice. And to me, like, Voodoo Circle needs him to be the vocalist for me to care. And so now that he's the vocalist again, apparently, I'll definitely be checking out. They have a new album called Hail to the King coming out later this year. The single's pretty much exactly what you would want to hear from them. Just like really solid melodic hard rock. I'm not sure I would even call it metal, but it's just really good stuff. So,
have you ever seen him live? I feel like I'm going off on a real tangent here, but have you ever seen David Reedman live?
I don't think I have, only because my one opportunity that I would have been able to see him was at Prague Power when Voodoo Circle played, and I don't think I caught that set.
That was back in 2014, if memory serves. So it was about 10 years ago. But I guess, I don't remember what you were doing at the time. That was a cool set. That had been, I think, my second time, if I'm not mistaken, seeing him, because I saw him with Pink Cream 69 about a decade before that, which was incredible. Like, it wasn't my favorite set list, but
I remember that day because, and we'll do more of this in one of our bonus episodes for the Patreons. We did like a march through our Prague Power experience for the first 10 years, which for me was pretty minimal, but going forward it won't be. And this was in 2014, and this was on Saturday, and I remember with them opened, I missed their set. I came in to see Divided Multitude, then left during Voodoo Circle's set, then came back for Master Plan, which was a band that we both sponsored. I think I caught some of Remedy Lane in its entirety, and then all of John Oliva. That was just one of those one of those days where I was just in and out of the venue. It's not quite like that anymore with where we're staying, not being that close to the venue. I'm spending more time in the venue, but that was just one of those situations where I was just kind of bouncing back and forth, and for whatever reason, I think I had wanted to see Voodoo Circle, but there must have been something else going on. This was also back when like reserving rooms at the Artmore was like such a pain in the ass, where like you had to like go wait. I remember Amy wanted to go with us to see Divided Multitude, and she missed the set. Maybe you missed the set too because you were waiting to get a room. I can't quite remember exactly. I know there were people that like didn't go see Divided Multitude because they were waiting to get their reservation for the hotel the following year. So I'm
so happy that's not a thing anymore. I did see that Divided Multitude set, and I remember it because it was like mostly covers because half the band was stuck in Europe. But I'm actually having like bad memories of that whole experience and how like bad that used to be, but I'm glad we're past that point now.
Yeah, we're past that because the hotel doesn't exist anymore, so it makes it easier to not have to go through it.
Cheers to that. But lots to look forward to. I think more than anything, I'm curious as to why you selected this album of the four from Circus Maximus's discography as we shift gears. And I say that because, again, the original intention was to do a retrospective, but there's a lot of material here. But why 9, their third full-length album?
It's my favorite number. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, the reason behind that is as simple as the fact that this was the first Circus Maximus album to come out while I was kind of back on the metal train again. First Chapter and Isolate came out kind of right in that era where I had kind of lost my way, so to speak, in the metal world, and so I remember you telling me about Circus Maximus. You were like, this first album's great. I remember them getting booked for Prog Power, like pretty much like sight unseen, sound unheard, so to speak, by most people. Glenn, I think, heard their first album and was just like, this'll do. And they've been back to the festival a number of times. I saw them there. I believe I want to say it was their second appearance at the festival, in 2009. And they opened on Saturday just to show where they've moved up the pecking order at Prog Power since then. And I remember as I always, was aware of them and I liked a couple of songs, but seeing them live really changed my perspective about the band, because to this day, I've seen them now 3 times, all 3 times at center stage, and they are one of the most, consistency is kind of hard to say based on 3 concerts, but they're one of the best sounding bands, at least consistently across the 3 times I've seen them. I was just always so impressed by how tight they sound live, how good their mix is, how good Michael's vocals are. Like, they are just one of those bands that I absolutely look forward to seeing live, almost more so for how good it sounds versus my love of the actual songs. And by the way, I really love the songs. So like we're going to do a bonus episode that's going to come out next week, where we're going to rank our excitement level of all the bands at Prog Power. And I mean, Circus Maximus is pretty much right up top for me, because to me, like, nobody just does as great of a job performing live. And I mean, maybe that's because they've had the same lineup from day one, which is a really impressive feat in the metal world. Like, they have had the same band members the whole way through. So maybe there's just this familiarity that the band members have with one another. But man, I'm so excited for this, and yeah, so that's kind of my long-winded way of saying that this was kind of the first Circus Maximus album that, like, I got as it was released and listened to it like right when it came out, and it also, I think, ties into, and I think I had alluded to this at the end of the last episode, or the second to last episode we did. Some of the tracks on this album just are burned into my head as part of that video announcement the year before they came back to Prog Power, where they were all dressed in their like silver jackets and out in the field, and like just talking about how they were coming back to Prog Power with their new sound. And it was, to this day, the best video, like, from the video announcement, of years of video announcements. To me, no one's ever really come close to, like, basically putting together like what Couch Potatoes was to high school media classes. It was absolutely brilliant. They didn't have to do that, and they did. And I think that ingratiated them with the goers of the festival, including the people that work for the festival as well. And so they've become, they were already a fan favorite, and I think that just put them right over the top. So I think of some of these, songs like Game of Life and Reach Within, and those songs particularly just remind me of that that video and how funny it was. And when they did actually come the following year to perform, at one point Glenn came out in the gold jacket, which was just absolutely hysterical. Glenn doesn't make a ton of like on stage appearances, which I think is kind of cool. Like, he doesn't Vince Russo it up and like have to make himself the center of attention. But when he does, it's just always such a memorable thing. And that was just hysterical. I was really hoping that they were going to tie something into that video. And so that was how they did it. It was pretty hilarious. So, yeah, that's kind of the reason why I chose it. Also, I don't really like Havoc all that much, so that kind of made it also a little bit easier to, at least between the two most recent albums.
Well, I agree with you there.
Nine was an easier choice.
I remember when they first burst out onto the scene when Ken Golden put out that debut album, which to this day, I don't know, I didn't have an album of the year in 2005, but the first chapter probably would have been it just because of how much I love that debut. And I think you hit the nail on the head. As a live act, their ability to recreate their sound, but with a more fulsome, loud, obviously, element to it, it's incredible. I don't know how they're able to do it time and time again. And it's not just at center stage. They had done a small U.S. run of shows a number of years ago now, but I caught them in New York City and it was the same thing. They just know how to record or produce that sound live. It's really something to behold, including the vocal elements where you have, kind of multiple people singing backing vocals, which it really checks off all the boxes. They really put the melodic in melodic prog, which is never a bad thing. But as I kind of alluded to earlier, on 9, which was, formally released on June 1st of 2012, the band admittedly went in a bit of a different direction. I think those first two albums are quite similar to one another in many ways. Straight up progressive metal, a lot of Dream Theater worship, a little bit of Symphony X worship as well. But on 9, they went for a more, well, at least in spots, a more concise, a more song-oriented style with a little bit less, I'll call it wankery, but I don't mean that.
I think the word you're looking for is palatable.
Yeah, I think it's just a little bit less proggy and a little more straight up accessible. And when bands do that, especially prog bands, it can go in a number of different directions. It could be a real hit or it could be a real miss. And there's been a lot of bands that have missed doing this, over time. Not that evolution is bad, but it's just jarring to somebody that's expecting a certain sound. 9 for me is kind of a blend of both. There are songs on this album which I absolutely adore. There's a handful of songs that are just songs that to this day I still really don't particularly enjoy, but I do think that the highs kind of outshine the lows, and I do prefer the album 100 times over to Havoc. I was never a fan of that release. I look forward to hearing whatever the band has in store as we forge on ahead. But 9 is kind of that transitional album where you hear elements of the first two albums and then you hear elements of almost the label that they were on because it's a Frontiers release, and you can almost hear some of those Frontiers elements on some of these songs.
I can't really disagree with any of that, to be honest. It's, to me, yeah, like the accessibility factor is definitely higher. Although I really enjoy the first two albums, and there's some songs from them that I'm excited to hear at Prog Power. But I think that with 9, they just did a really good job at taking their bass sound and making it a little bit more warm to people that maybe aren't big fans of super proggy music. And I'd argue that their first two albums weren't super proggy to begin with. I think they were pretty accessible. It's the type of prog that I really like, that it's very melodic and it's not as masturbatory as some other bands can tend to be. But this, I think they just tried to warm themselves up to, I think, a wider audience even more with this album, but I think without letting go of what makes them. And I think that's why this album was such a success. Whereas, I don't know, Havoc, I listened to a couple of times when it first came out, and I just remember thinking it was just okay. And I never really went back to it. And I was, when we were originally going to do like a full discography, I was, really curious about how I was going to feel returning back to it. I guess that's going to be pushed to another day, but I remember just not feeling like it was a bit disappointing. I think, it was interesting because when they came back to Prog Power, one of the years, I actually misspoke earlier too. They actually came back to Prague Power the year after their debut and played at the showcase on Thursday night in the Loft. So the first time I saw them was actually the third time they played at the festival. And then they would play again in 2013 and then again in 2016, which was the last time they were at the festival, which is crazy. That was 8 years ago. And again, there was just another really memorable set that was like the primer for Blind Guardian to come out and play Imaginations. I mean, that was one of the most insane 1-2 punches of prog and power I've ever seen live at Prague Power. That was really pretty amazing. And I remember it being sold out and both sets being very well attended. But yeah, so like, it seems like from a set list point of view, they like 9, and there's a lot of songs that I think make their way onto set lists from 9. I remember one of the years of Prague Power, they literally said that they would not be playing any songs that they had already played at Prague Power, which I thought was really cool. So like, I basically made a playlist of every song that they never played at Prague Power, including the first chapter, which is a very long track from the first album. And sure enough, they played the whole damn thing. It was pretty incredible. So yeah, it looks to me, as far as I am aware, that the set list this year is really going to be kind of just like a greatest hits type of situation. And I think at this point in time, they've kind of earned that point, you know. They're at that point where like they've done we're going to play what we haven't played yet. And, you know, they don't have a new album. So like, let's just do a best of Circus Maximus. I'm here for it.
Greatest hits for a band that's probably never had a hit, but I totally understand what you mean. It's going to be a lot of crowd favorites, I'm sure. But with that, I say we get into it. 9, as I said, released June 1st, 2012 on Frontiers. A bit of a departure for Frontiers, which at this point wasn't doing a lot of like prog metal. They were doing mostly that melodic rock or melodic metal style of bands like Eclipse and stuff like that. So Frontiers would obviously expand their horizons quite a bit, as you know, they've signed bands like Seven Spires and all sorts of bands that you wouldn't really lump in with the AOR bands of the world. But this was not terribly far off from some of those aforementioned Frontiers artists. And the album starts with a 1:16 long intro called Forging, which really just kind of has these spotty vocals and sound effects, but it's really just an intro to Architect of Fortune, a 10-plus minute epic, the longest track on the album, and arguably maybe one of 2 songs that really harken back to the first 2 albums. This is kind of gives the listener a false sense of what 9 is, because this particular song is very proggy. It has this really dark vibe at the beginning with both the drums and the guitars and almost like a tribal beat of sorts, but it's more of a mid-paced tune that's even proggier than I remember it. And about 1:45 into the track, these keyboards kick in. Beautiful, lush keyboards that remind me of Darkwater, another band that's actually playing in Atlanta this year. And eventually,
same night.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, how about that? And then eventually the speed of the song kicks in, especially during some of those instrumental sections. I think the verses are good, but it's those memorable choruses on this song with the uplifting lyrics that really just hook me in. It even has this kind of like a slower bridge towards the end with an acoustic guitar. I am a huge fan of this track, and I love the way it ends. The keyboards and the drums just kind of set the stage for this really beautiful finale, finalizing or final portion of this, epic song. The song's actually a lot better than I remember it. I always knew that the song was on the disc, but I enjoyed it a lot more listening to it repeatedly this week than I think I had at any time prior to this. This is a monster song, and it really, if the whole album was like this, I think I'd probably think it might be their best album, but there's, again, some departures which pull it down for me a bit. But what are your thoughts on Architect of Fortune?
Song of the week.
Really?
I love this song. Yeah, just everything that you just said applies. It's just to me to be able to make a 10-minute song like this, feel like it's just as long as any of the other tracks. And most of the tracks on this album are really about 5 minutes or less, which is really kind of interesting, considering that, this is a band that had a 19-minute song on their first album, as I mentioned before. But the song has so many changes, and I like every single portion of the song. It's really, like, to me, exactly what I want out of a 10-minute prog song, and I think it's phenomenal. And I'm gonna probably have some trouble deciding on a minute because there's so many great parts of the song. But there's actually a part that I really like, and it's actually it's a lyrical part, and I'll probably make sure that that's in the clip. But it's just the way that it's towards the beginning of the song. The way that Michael Erickson says God, when it says misled by God, I don't know what it is. It just hits me, like, just the way that he says it. I don't know if this is its accent or what, but it's just like, it gets me so excited. Like, I'm going to mark out if they play this song in Atlanta, because it's just such a killer tune. So, let's give it a listen. We'll come back and, namaste for the rest of the album.
That was a piece of Architect of Fortune by Circus Maximus, an excellent choice. I nearly picked it myself. I think it's really setting the stage for an interesting release because, as I said, the next few tracks don't sound much like it. And you joked earlier with Namaste, the third track. This is one of those tracks which just does not grab me so much. And I don't know why, because it has elements of stuff that I love. It's a bit more of a banger. I think the verses kind of employ this weird vocal tone, which kind of isn't necessary. The chorus is really a lot better, I think. Some cool keyboard patches, but not my favorite. And the instrumental portion of Namaste is really just a little bit nondescript and not as memorable. It's a decent song, but probably one of my least favorite on the album. And I'm sure you're going to disagree with me, but I've never gotten into this song. There's much better stuff on here.
I don't know that I am going to disagree with you, actually. Like, I think that this is one of those tracks that I think comes across better live, to be honest with you. I think it's a good song. I happen to like a bunch of other songs on this album a bit better. So I'm kind of with you. I don't know if I dislike it or I find it as off-putting as you do. I think it's still a pretty solid tune, but I just think there's better things on display here. But I really like the chorus more than anything else. I think that the rest of the verses are a little bit meh, but the chorus is really strong, and you have like those really great keyboards just like kind of leading the way. So yeah, this is a song where I have a feeling they're going to play it live, just because I feel like it's kind of a regular track in their live setting, and I won't mind hearing it live. Again, I just think it's a cool live track, but it's a good. I like it. I like it, but I don't love it. The next handful of tracks, I'm definitely a bigger fan of.
I agree with that, and if they do play it live, I will go grab us beers because I don't need to hear it. But we'll not be missing the Game of Life if they actually play that. It is an immediately immediately better. I love the keyboards and drums at the beginning. It's not the proggiest song on the album, but it's just a really melodic and catchy track. And I like the chunk of the guitars when they kick in. It packs a punch, which is nice. Solid verses and much better than the prior tune. And I just like how it kind of builds to that really catchy chorus. It's one of the better choruses on the album. And all I can say about Game of Life is that they're back on track with this one, because I prefer this track a lot.
Same. This is exactly the type of track that makes me love this band, because they take the melodies and they just inject it into a proggy song, and to make it so, like, you almost forget you're listening to prog metal. It's just, to me, I absolutely love it. And I feel like this is one of those tracks where if you were trying to get somebody into metal, or particularly prog metal, and you wanted to kind of ease them into it and not, play them Change of Seasons and overwhelm them immediately with a 25-minute song, maybe you play them Game of Life, maybe you play them the next track, Reach Within. But I think, there's something very accessible and easy about listening to this track. And I agree with you. The chorus is catchy as all hell. And at the same time, like, that's not to say that these guys aren't like consummate musicians, because the musicianship is excellent. It's just like, it's not, I think they'll a bit later, there'll be a little bit more kind of like Dream Theater-esque solos and stuff. But this is very like by the numbers, just a song that frankly could be on the radio. Like, it's an easy tune to listen to. It's not super long. Good stuff. I'm really curious to see what your song of the week is going to be, but let's continue on.
Well, you mentioned Reach Within, and I agree with you. This is, well, I shouldn't say this. I think Game of Life is really one of the standout tracks. Reach Within, as we get to the next tune, I definitely enjoy it more than Namaste, but this is one of those tracks that I think is actually better live than it is on the album. It starts off almost like a somber ballad, and it's really not a ballad, but it kind of has that light, airy feel to it, almost whimsical sounding in many ways. The verses actually have a pop-like quality to them, which is kind of interesting. And the chorus is kind of simple, both in terms of the technical aspects to them as well as the way it's constructed. It's not bad. It's just not my favorite track. So for me, up until this point, the album's a bit of a mixed bag. Some tracks I love, other tracks I don't care for. Reach Within somewhere in the middle. But before I hear your thoughts, I'd be remiss not to mention the lineup that we've been referring to. Obviously, Michael Erickson on vocals, Mats Haugen on guitars, Glenn Mullen on bass, Truls Haugen on drums, and Lasse Finnbraten on keyboards. Just a fantastic lineup, and all of whom have songwriting credits on this material. So they all kind of lend their hand at this. But tell me your thoughts on Reach Within, because I have a feeling you're a fan of this one as well.
Yeah, and just to piggyback the personnel list, again, this entire lineup, 4 out of the 5 members have been together since 2000 when the band started. Lasse joined the band as the keyboard player in 2005, which was the year that the first album came out. So for all intents and purposes, this entire band has been together since the first album was released almost 20 years ago. Next year will be the 20th anniversary. So maybe that might be a good time to revisit that album. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. But yeah, that is such and it bears repeating, it is such a feat in this world of just, people having musical differences and personality clashes and all these things. And for a band to stick together, maybe it's the fact that they only release an album every 9 years or so, it feels like.
That can't hurt.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they tour a ton either. So maybe that's what makes it easier. Makes me kind of think of Shadow Gallery, like another band that pretty much had the same lineup for most of their run. And again, they didn't tour at all and released an album every 3 or 4 years. So maybe it's easier to keep your differences at bay if you don't have to actually hang out very much. But anyway, Reach Within. I can't listen to the song and not think of the aforementioned, Prog Power video. This was the song that they transformed into almost like a, polka or like easy listening version of the song.
And if you think he's kidding, go listen to it, because I don't think that your description even does justice to what that is.
And of all the songs on the album, like this is the one I think that would fit that motif best anyway. But the video kind of starts out with them with their new sound, and then it towards the end it kind of morphs back into the actual song. This was the only single that was released for this album, and as a matter of fact, it's I think it's the only single they've ever released, at least according to Metal Archives. So that's an interesting fact, I suppose. I mean, probably physically, I'm sure they've released digital singles beyond this one, but I don't like this one as much as Game of Life, but I do like it quite a bit. I agree with you. It's definitely a fun track live, but it's almost a little bit too reserved, I guess, for a band that I think has. I mean, maybe it's meant to be like the ballad of the. It's kind of like a really cheery ballad, but I don't have any issues with it. I like you said, I like Game of Life better. I like Architect of Fortune even more. But this is a good tune, and again, I would be surprised if they don't play this one live either, just because I think it has a connection to the festival in a way that not many bands have songs that are connected to a festival. So I look forward to hearing it if they do end up playing it live. Good tune.
Yeah, I think that's fair. What I will also say is I think we get to a couple of tunes here in a row which are just absolutely phenomenal. And the first of which is I Am. I absolutely love this song. It's upbeat, it's melodic, it's well constructed. It really does have an AOR sound to it and would lend itself well on just about any Frontiers release. So I find it kind of interesting that Circus was the one that put it out. It's very tight, and it's arguably it's might be the best song on the album, just like note for note, pound for pound, in terms of the way it hits you. The verses are very simple but catchy. The chorus, top notch. But some of those keyboard fills and the solos are just so enjoyable. It really reminds me of like a Jordan Rudess type of approach to keyboard solos. And just the way that it ends just puts a smile on my face. I've always been a fan of this song. It's not my song of the week, believe it or not, but it easily could have been. I am a huge fan of I Am.
Completely agree. This was probably one of three possibilities for Song of the Week for me. I think the fact that Architect of Fortune feels like an outlier on this album was why I ended up choosing it. But man, this is a great tune. Another one I would be very happy to hear live for all the reasons that you mentioned. It's just so damn catchy. Like, and Circus Maximus in particular with this album, it's the type of music that just, I think, puts you in a good mood. Like, it's not dreary. Like, it's very uplifting. And I don't know, like, this was for me such an easy an album to prep for, because sometimes when we're going down the darker roads and listening to like black metal and doom metal and death metal and stuff like that, it's kind of like me being a fairly cheery person. It's a little bit hard for me to repeatedly listen to music like that and try to maintain a like a kind of a non I'm not sure the word I'm looking for here.
Almost approaching it like an academic exercise, I guess. I'm going to.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to not just talk about the albums, whether I like them or don't like them. You know, and sometimes it's hard to kind of separate the fact that it's not my type of music from being able to actually like analyze and talk about it. And this is easy. Like, this is, to me, as easy as putting on a Stradivarius album that I've heard 100 times. Because it's just a joy to listen to. And this song in particular, I think really, personifies that feeling. So yeah, big fan. And, yeah, really, just another really good tune. And I think so far, at least for me, there haven't been any misses for me, I will say. though I do like some songs better than others.
I think that's fair. I mean, I don't know that I would have any misses per se, but there are songs that I definitely prefer to others. And that leads us to Used, which, in a complete surprise, is my song of the week. I would never have guessed that going into this week. But let's give it a listen, and then I'll come back with my thoughts as to why, and you can share your thoughts on this 7th track. Here's Used.
Everything felt and looked transparent. I'm starving from the lack of myself. I'm suffering around my whole world. Please, someone help me through and take away the pain. Define or defeat you. Me and I are about to collide. I used to hope for a miracle. Decide and bend for me like all hope was lost. So I got used to the pain of being used.
So that was Circus Maximus's Used, and this is a bit more in your face, and it reminds me of like late era Dream Theater with Mike Portnoy. The guitars are very much in your face, but there's this pleasant cadence to the entire track. I think it's one of the few tracks where Michael Erickson's voice actually shines, and for that, I think that's what made me gravitate towards it, where his voice was almost an instrument unto itself, which you got a lot on those first 2 albums. There's this Middle Eastern sounding bridge. It almost sounds like he's playing a sitar, which is awesome, and a funky guitar solo, which I think is particularly well done. I don't even know that I really remembered this tune all that much, but every time I played it this week, I just loved it. And while it would have been very easy for me to go with Architect or I Am, I'm going with Used.
Cool. This is my least favorite song on the album.
All right. We got some Motley Crue on going on here. Talk to me. What is it about
I don't think I hate it quite as much as you hated my Motley Crue choice, but I think that all the things that I said that I liked about everything up to this point, like all of the really melodic and like hooky choruses and everything, like this feels more like a Dream Theater song to me. Like the keyboards are very Kevin Moore Dream Theater, like Awake, I would say, like Awake era Dream Theater. It's a solid, like probably the most progressive metal-esque song on the album, but it kind of lacks the melodicness that I really enjoy about the previous tracks, or just something like some sort of hook or whatever. It's a good tune. It was the one that stuck out to me as like not having a very memorable part to it that the rest of the songs had. So just my 2 cents.
Well, you have a right to your opinion. Whether or not it's right, I will leave to everybody else to decide. But I'm a big fan of this one. But lead us to The One, which is one of the more, dare I say, proggy / modern alt rock vibe to this one. This one's a bit of an outlier. It also happens to be the shortest song. It's just 4 minutes long. What are your thoughts on The One?
For some reason, when the song came on, it struck me as like one of the songs I seem to remember the most from this album, and I don't really know why. Maybe they played it live a lot. I don't know, but I think that it kind of harkens back to some of the other tracks on the album, where it kind of feels almost a little bit like a pop song, like a metal song that has a little bit of a poppy vibe to it. I like it. I think it's a good song. I don't put it up as high as I don't know, like for me, Game of Life, Reach Within, and I Am is like this really awesome 3 song block towards the beginning of the album, and this song I think fits into that mold as far as the style of the song goes. I just don't think it's as good of a tune as those 3. It's still a good song. I just don't think it's a great tune. But again, they could really play just about anything from this album live, and I really wouldn't complain at all. Even Used, which it's my least favorite song on the album, but like not by a lot. Like it's just picking nits, as they say. But the one has a really, I think, memorable chorus to it. But I think the song, and there's a really cool keyboard solo that leads into the final chorus towards the end of the song. But there's songs I like more. I'll just say that.
I actually like this one a lot, and surprise, surprise, it was nearly my song of the week as well. The bass lines really stood out to me, as does like that lower end guitar tone, and I think that the whole song really has this like bouncy quality to it, which I kind of like, especially with the keyboards in the background. Great vocal melodies as well, and on an album where they really kind of simplified things a bit, this one just kind of resonated with me as much, if not more, than a lot of the others. And I thought the instrumental section was great as well. There's just not a lot for me to pick apart on this one. Whereas the next track, Burn After Reading, which on paper I should love, almost a 9-minute epic tune. I didn't love this track, and it's good. It's just not my favorite by any stretch of the imagination. There's elements of acoustic guitars and vocals at the beginning, which almost gave me a Tesla vibe when we covered them in the archives. But it takes a while to kind of get going, and about 2 minutes or so in, it kind of picks up pace a little bit. I think the production is top notch. I think the chorus is melodic and catchy, but there's just elements of this which I don't know. I don't know if it was the instrumental section, which kind of had this Jordan Rudess vibe to it, which I didn't care for, which stands in contrast a bit to what I said earlier, or if it was that quiet interlude in the middle, which I found a little bit boring, but it picks up and ends very well. It's a very solid and has a big feel to it. I don't know. It's kind of all over the place, and I think my description kind of tells you that I don't know what I'm saying here, but like it's a good tune, but I wouldn't say it's a great tune, and it doesn't just beat me over the head with its greatness.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on this one. I think it has a very memorable chorus. It almost has like the chorus has kind of like a last song on the album kind of vibe to it, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I'm with you. I feel like Architect of Fortune feels a little bit more cohesive as a long track. And I think the final track, Last Goodbye, also, it feels a little bit more cohesive. I think this song might have been better placed somewhere else on the album, not preceding a track that's even longer. But again, kind of just nitpicking here. I think it's a solid tune. I agree with you. It's not one of my favorites on the album, but again, I don't really think there's any bad songs on this album. So, yeah, I'm right there with you.
Well, I agree. So of the three epics, I think it's probably like definitely my least favorite of the three. But Last Goodbye is this nearly 10-minute jaunt through time that kind of takes you out. Again, more in line with, I guess, their earlier sound. What are your thoughts on this closing track?
I love it, and I think it's a great track to end things with. They picked the longest track to start things with and the second longest track to end things with, and I think they were both well placed. The beginning of the song kind of starts out with this very kind of 80s like keyboard key tone to it that kind of reminded me a bit of Stranger Things. And then it slowly builds. It feels like it's going to be a little bit of a ballady, and then the guitars kick in, and all of a sudden we're kind of off to the races. Perfect. I feel like this would be the perfect song to kind of finish a set list with, both in like lyrical tone and, just musically. It's, in general, I think it's more of like a softer kind of song. It doesn't have that kind of heaviness that Architect of Fortune or Burn After Reading has, but I think it's more memorable than Burn After Reading in my, opinion. And then just has this really like, almost like atmospheric, like airy kind of outro that really kind of takes you, like you said, takes you out. I think it's a really lovely way to kind of finish things up, and I think it's a really good tune.
I don't disagree. I think the keyboard intro that you kind of alluded to earlier really has a 80s new wave vibe to it, which was kind of cool. It's upbeat, it's beautiful, it's melodic, but it is the culmination of this band kind of, retaining its core sound, but turning the page on the first two albums in many ways. It's more straightforward and less proggy. I think it has one of the best choruses on the album, and even though you have another Dream Theater inspired instrumental section, and although this particular track lacks some of the punch from earlier in the album, the melody is just so infectious that it goes out a winner, and I think it's a great closing tune.
Yeah, I mean, exactly right. I'm with you 100%. I'll kind of tie things up with this. This was a quote from Glenn, the bass player, talking about the differences between this album and the previous two. He said, 2 huge elements in the new material are first and foremost the evolution of the songwriting and the accessibility of the music. When you combine that with a new sound and production, you have a pretty different outcome from what we did on Isolate. We've been and always will be super proud of what we accomplished with the previous albums, but I think we've taken it to the next level with the new stuff. So, from the horse's mouth on that one, I'm kind of in agreement with that kind of feeling that, while I don't think that this is going to be remembered as as much of a traditional prog metal, hit album like the first 2 albums were, I think that they nicely wove in accessible aspects to make this something that maybe power metal fans could listen to or non-metal fans could listen to and feel like, hey, this isn't, just a lot of instruments making sounds just because the guys are capable of doing so. And honestly, just for me, I think Michael Erickson is probably one of the most underappreciated singers in the world. Like, not just prog metal, not just metal, just in music. He's such a great singer. I definitely urge you to go onto YouTube and find some of the clips of him trying out for, I don't know if it would be trying out, but just singing on I think it was a some sort of European American Idol-esque show. I don't know if it was in Norway in particular, but there's some cool clips of him singing in front of like a audience, quite like very similar to like an American Idol or America's Got Talent kind of situation. Definitely look for that, just to see like he's got an incredible voice, and it's not just narrowed to only metal. But on top of that, I don't know if you've ever met any of these guys before, or they're just like very likable. They're just a likable bunch of guys, and I know that probably shouldn't affect how like we rate an album, and it probably won't affect my score. But I mean, I just think that makes them even easier to listen to when you know that they're just like a really great bunch of guys. Goofy, obviously, if that video was any indication. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. I think we really could have picked any of the first 3 albums, and it would have been a really enjoyable review. But this was great, and really just kind of wet the whistle, I think, for Prog Power and their set. Which, being that they're second to last on day 1, I imagine they'll get at least 75 minutes, if not more, to really play some of their most memorable tunes. So I have to say, like, I don't know that there's much else I'm more excited about seeing.
Yeah, well said. I look forward to that conversation in its entirety on the Patreon feed, but I'm going to throw it over to you and ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, does 9 get a 9 or somewhere in that vicinity?
Not quite. I'm going to give it an 8.5. I just think it's a really just solid, like really enjoyable album, start to finish. I think some of the songs I don't like as much pull it down a little bit, but there are definitely songs on here that are, in that sniffing that 10 area. But I just think overall, it's just I just give it a very good 8.5. Curious to see where my rating will be for the other albums at some point. I'm sure we'll get to them, but this is just exactly what I'm looking for when it comes to prog metal, which is melodies and not as much of the technical aspects of it, and more of the just pleasing melodies and pleasing musical themes. So this was a blast, and I think a fun way to kind of inadvertently prep for Prog Power.
Good choice. My score is not quite as high. As I said, I think there's a couple, maybe 2 or 3 tracks that bring down the score. Not that they're bad tracks. It's just, I don't know. I guess I think I hold the first 2 albums in a little bit higher regard. So this is a 7.75 for me. Still a very good score and a very good album, but I think I'm in the minority in that I don't love the entire thing, start to finish. I think that there's ups and downs or peaks and valleys on this album, but by and large, they dip their toe into a different pool, and it is still very enjoyable. And I think that even some of the tracks that I don't particularly enjoy as much as others in a live setting will be really enjoyable. So I'm looking forward to whatever it is that comes our way in just a couple of weeks now. So that is Circus Maximus. That is 9, and that is an excellent choice. And before we talk about next week's request from one of our Patreon members, some news items that I think are worth noting. Primal Fear has gone through some changes, to say the least, in the last week. More than half the lineup has left the band, and that's specifically guitarist Alex Bayrott, guitarist Tom Nauman, drummer Michael Ayer, and bassist Alex Jansen. All have left the band. They say that it is not due to anything in particular, that it is not like there was bad blood or any argument that ensued. But alas, half the lineup is now gone. Magnus Carlson has said that they will play with them in a live setting, so I guess that will kind of salvage some of the live elements of the band. What are your thoughts on this? Obviously we don't have all the details here, but Primal Fear definitely having some issues right now.
Yeah, I don't really have any thoughts because I haven't had a lot of thoughts on Primal Fear in a long time.
Fair enough.
So I think that they have just kind of become a very derivative band. I typically will put on one of their albums and enjoy it and then not really think much beyond that. They put on a good live show. Mad props to Thomas Nauman for pulling me to the side of the stage at one of their shows and tossing me a few guitar picks because he saw how much I was enjoying them on a live setting. So that guy will always be a legend to me for that. I thought that was super cool. But yeah, I mean, Ralph's still there, Matt's still there. I think it shouldn't affect too much the live performances. But I saw this and was kind of like, if this was Halloween, I would be a hell of a lot more devastated. I'll just say that. That's
fair. In other news, Sebastian Bach going out on tour in North America, kicking off a tour in Portland, Oregon on October 4th, ending November 20th in Roseville, California. Bunch of shows here. It looks like he's out touring for his new album, The Child Within the Man. So that will be interesting. Always a lightning rod of attention, Sebastian Bach. And no doubt that he can still pull it off live. So that is that. And then finally, a new album from the one and only Devin Townsend. His new album, Power Nerd, comes out on October 25th, 2024. That is right. The album is called Power Nerd. I've got no thoughts other than sign me up. I look forward to listening to this because I have no idea what this is going to sound like.
What do you say to that title? I am downloading the single, the title track as we speak. But boy, you want to talk about an artist that I went from having like no care in the world about to somebody that I absolutely love. Devin Townsend is that guy. And now he has a song and an album called Power Nerd. So, I'm in. I am Devin for life.
Nice. I like it. I'm looking forward to that as well. So maybe something we can cover in the future months. And that brings us to next week, a return of sorts for One X Japan to the podcast, this time by request. It was my first exposure to the band, and an album which is truly, in many ways, unlike any other, and that is The Art of Life. An album, a song, in 29 minutes, and that is what we're covering next week on the podcast. Thanks to one of our Patreon members, Adam Askoff. Thank you so much for the request. This is going to be an interesting one because this is a really interesting album, and I remember when I first heard it and all the thoughts that I had that came along with it at the time. And for someone that may not be as familiar with this album, I'm really, really curious to hear your thoughts on this one because it is just a little bit different than some of the stuff we've done in the past.
Yeah, although I would point you to our change of seasons discussion from on the bonus episodes of the Patreon, which is kind of a similar thing, a 1:30, 20 to 30 minute track. So yeah, this will be interesting. I really enjoyed our previous discussion about X Japan. This I think is just really fascinating because other than a change of seasons, I don't know that we've done an episode on just one song like that makes up one album. I don't know. Would you consider this an EP at 29 minutes, or is this considered a full length album?
I've always considered this a full length album, but at the same time, if you said to me it was an EP, I don't know how I'd argue with you because it's just not that long. But then again, we covered a Slayer album, which was I think even shorter than this. So.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to this, and that's going to carry us out into Prague Power, and then we'll be back the week after to do our annual, review, discussion, thoughts, experiences, all that. But this time we're going to day one, which we didn't do the previous. At least I didn't the previous two festivals. So it went from 2 years in a row where I didn't think day one was worth buying a ticket to day one being my most anticipated day of the 4 days this year. So, quite the improvement there. But I'm pumped particularly for the top two bands, Angra and Circus Maximus, who we just, spoke about at length. But also just a really solid, bottom three bands with, Victorious, Dream Evil, and Darkwater. All bands that I'm looking forward to seeing to one degree or another, and for very different reasons. And again, I urge you to check out our bonus episode that's going to drop likely Monday evening, Tuesday morning, around that area. But we'll talk about our excitement levels for each band, rank the bands from top to bottom to top, depending on what order you want to go in. And looking forward to that. That's always a favorite of mine, and a little something extra for the Patreon members who we greatly appreciate, especially when they upgrade their their subscriptions to higher tiers. So always that's always lovely. So you know who you are. Thank you. And if you haven't, we have. Geez, I have to go look and see, but we have a nice segment of bonus episodes up to this point. We've now recorded 16 bonus episodes. Some may be more timely or more evergreen than others, but and some of them I think will eventually be released on the public feed or whatever. But in the meantime, I don't think anything we've recorded for Patreon has been released outside of Patreon. And for that reason, we want the people that are paying customers to really feel like they're getting something exclusive. But that said, I think there's also things, like I said, that are evergreen and would make for, interesting listening for, the general public. So, but if you want to hear it when it first gets released, Patreon is the way to go. So, you can find the link on our website, metalexchangepodcast.com. It's up there on the top, and everything else you need to find. And I made the mistake of drinking a cup of coffee during this episode, so I'm a little rambly. But happy that your internet is working again. And this episode is going to drop a little bit late for the Patreon folks because Justin had a little bit of technology cramps, but
we're back in business now, baby. We're all good. But well said. I look forward to jumping in with you next week and talking about some X Japan and recording some bonus content. And
we'll make it up to everybody and release the X Japan episode like several days earlier for the Patreon folks. So hopefully I'm sure that they're on the edge of their seats waiting for the Circus Maximus episode to drop finally, but we'll make it up to you. So
cheers, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, I'm gonna go switch to decaf.